Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive where we get to roll up our sleeves and dig through a mountain of research and articles and just fascinating little details to try to bring you the best of what we found. And today, I have to admit, I'm kind of nervous about this topic because we're going back in time to 18th century Britain, and while I'm all for powdered wigs and that sort of thing, I'm not sure how I feel about some of the culinary delicacies of the time.
Well, luckily for us, we won't actually have to eat anything today, but we do have a fantastic guide to 18th century life through the lens of food. I'm Kimiani, and I'll be your expert for this culinary journey.
And I'm Hargi, and I'm always excited to learn something new, especially if it combines history and food and cooking.
Yeah.
So tell me, who is this mysterious figure from the past that we're going to be learning about today?
Well, her name is Martha Bradley, and she may not be a household name today, but in her time, she was a prominent cookbook author, a really skilled cook with over 30 years of experience, and she was really passionate about educating people and empowering them to master the art of cooking.
Okay, well, that sounds pretty interesting. But you know what really gets me is that we know so little about her life.
Mhm.
It's like she just appeared out of nowhere, wrote this incredible cookbook, and then vanished back into obscurity.
It's true. The details of her life are pretty mysterious. All we really have to go on is her masterpiece, The British Housewife, and then just a few little publisher's notes. It's almost as if she wanted her work to speak for itself, let her culinary skills and her passion for teaching take center stage.
Well, and what a stage it is. The British Housewife isn't just a cookbook. It's really more like a complete guide to running an 18th century household.
It really is remarkable how ambitious it is, and the scope of it is really incredible. It's originally published as a 42-week part work, which is really fascinating in itself. Can you imagine, subscribing to a cookbook and getting a new installment every week for a whole year?
Talk about delayed gratification. I can just imagine people, eagerly awaiting that next installment, and all the culinary possibilities. Must have been a really exciting time for those readers.
Yeah, absolutely. It really shows how different the pace of life was back then, a time when people really savored the process of learning and cooking. And then a few years later, all those weekly installments were collected into a massive 2-volume edition with over 1,200 pages.
Wow, that's a pretty big cookbook.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds more like a culinary encyclopedia than something you just, casually browse through when you're looking for dinner inspiration. And to think this was all organized by month, which really highlights how important seasonality and resourcefulness were in 18th century food planning.
It really shows the connection people had to nature and the rhythm of the seasons. They understood that certain ingredients were only available at certain times of the year, and they planned their meals around that, which is, something we could all learn from today.
Okay, well, I'm already starting to feel a little intimidated by Martha Bradley's skills in the kitchen. Yeah, I can barely plan my meals a week in advance, let alone entire year.
Yeah.
But tell me, what kind of cook was she? Was she all about that, traditional British fare, or did she have some surprises up her sleeve?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because Martha Bradley was this fascinating combination of national pride and a willingness to embrace new ideas. She loved British ingredients and she had a deep appreciation for traditional British food, but she was also really influenced by French Nouvelle cuisine, which was this
Yeah,
big culinary movement that was happening all over Europe at the time.
Nouvelle cuisine. Yeah, that sounds so chic and sophisticated. It makes me think of like delicate pastries and elegant presentations.
Yeah.
A far cry from the heavy over-the-top dishes that I imagine were popular in the early part of the century.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Nouvelle cuisine was all about simplifying and refining, moving away from those heavy sauces and elaborate garnishes and really focusing on lighter, fresher dishes that emphasize the natural flavors of the ingredients.
It sounds like a real breath of fresh air in the culinary world. So how did this French influence, blend with Martha Bradley's passion for British food? I'm curious how she managed to combine those two seemingly different approaches.
Well, that's what makes her work so interesting. She was able to kind of weave together those two culinary threads and create dishes that were both, rooted in British tradition, but also had that touch of French elegance. So, for example, she included recipes for classic British dishes like roast beef and Yorkshire pudding and plum pudding, all of those cornerstones of British cuisine. But she also introduced more elaborate dishes like fricassees and ragouts and even pilafs, all showing that French influence.
It sounds like she was really walking a tightrope, respecting tradition, but also embracing innovation. Did she have any, favorite ingredients or techniques that she really liked to use?
Well, one thing that really stands out is her use of fresh seasonal ingredients. She always emphasized the importance of sourcing, the best quality produce and meats and using local and seasonal ingredients whenever possible. And she wasn't afraid to experiment with new techniques and flavor combinations, often drawing inspiration from other cookbook authors like Hannah Glass. But she always put her own unique spin on things. She would often simplify Glassie's recipes and streamline the instructions and just generally make them more accessible to the home cook.
So she was kind of like a culinary Marie Kondo, tidying up those recipes and making them, spark joy in the kitchen, all while staying true to her British roots and adding a dash of French flair. It's that combination of practicality and innovation and personality that really makes her stand out.
Absolutely. And don't forget that sharp wit of hers. How she made those playful little jabs at French extravagance and even poked fun at German butchery practices. Her personality really shines through in her writing, and it makes her work so much more engaging and relatable, even centuries later.
Yeah, it's that human element that I really love about historical deep dives like this. It's not just about dates and facts. It's about connecting with people from the past and understanding their lives and their passions, and in this case, their culinary creations. But speaking of culinary creations, there's one aspect of Bradley's cookbook that we haven't talked about yet. And it's one that might make some modern readers, a little squeamish.
Yes, you're talking about her use of, let's say, unconventional ingredients, those intestines and cockscombs and udders that we mentioned earlier.
Exactly, ingredients that most of us wouldn't even think about cooking with today.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart, but it's important to remember that this was a time when food was really precious and nothing went to waste. Using every part of the animal wasn't just about being frugal, it was about respecting the resource and minimizing waste. It was a way of life.
It really challenges our modern ideas about what's edible and what's palatable, but it also gives us a fascinating look into the culinary practices of a bygone era,
Yeah.
and reminds us that food culture is always evolving.
It does indeed. What might seem strange or even repulsive to us today was once considered perfectly normal, even desirable. I mean, who knows what future generations will think about our modern food habits?
That's a good point. Okay, so we've got this comprehensive guide to 18th century life, a strong-willed and talented cook, a blend of British and French influences, and a dash of, well, let's just say adventurous ingredients for good measure. What's not to love? But before we get too carried away with our time-traveling culinary fantasies, let's take a moment to appreciate Martha Bradley's legacy.
Yes, let's do that. Her impact on the culinary world is undeniable, despite her relative obscurity today. The British Housewife was hugely influential in its time. It was widely used in colonial America and Ireland, spreading her culinary wisdom far beyond the borders of Britain.
So her reach extended far beyond what she could have imagined. What a testament to the power of her work. And it wasn't just about the recipes. She was clearly a dedicated educator.
Yeah.
The book was so carefully organized and structured, making it easy to follow and learn from. And it shows her genuine desire to empower people to become confident and competent cooks.
She certainly was. And while her recipes may not all be to our modern tastes, her spirit of innovation and her emphasis on seasonality and resourcefulness and her dedication to sharing her knowledge continue to inspire cooks and food enthusiasts even today.
And she reminds us that history is full of fascinating people like her, who may not be household names, but who have made significant contributions to their fields. But for someone who had such a profound impact on 18th century cuisine, it's amazing how little we know about her personal life. It's almost as if she deliberately chose to let her work speak for itself.
That's a very interesting point. Maybe she felt that her personal life was irrelevant to her culinary legacy, or perhaps she just preferred to keep her private life private. A concept that seems almost alien in today's world of social media and constant self-promotion.
It makes you wonder what stories she could tell, what experiences shaped her culinary journey, what challenges she faced as a working woman in 18th century Britain.
It's a mystery just waiting to be solved. But maybe in a way that air of mystery just adds to her allure and allows her culinary genius to shine even brighter.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive into Martha Bradley's world, I'm left with this lingering question, a sort of culinary what if that I can't shake.
Oh, I love a good what if. Tell me more.
Imagine just for a moment that we could go back in time and have a conversation with Martha Bradley herself. What would you ask her? What insights would you hope to gain?
That's a fantastic question. It would be amazing to hear about her experiences firsthand. I think I'd be most curious to learn about her creative process, you know? How did she come up with her recipes? What inspired her? What were her favorite ingredients to work with?
I love that. It would be incredible to get a glimpse into her culinary mind, to understand how she approached cooking, and also be curious to know about the challenges she faced as a woman in a male-dominated profession.
Yeah.
How did she overcome those obstacles and achieve such success?
And I wonder what she would think of our modern food culture, our obsession with convenience foods and exotic ingredients. Would she be impressed by our technological advancements in the kitchen or horrified by our reliance on processed foods?
Those are all such great questions. It really makes you think about how someone from her time would view our modern world, especially when it comes to something as fundamental as food.
It does indeed. It's a reminder that food is more than just sustenance. It's a reflection of our culture and our values and our history. And it's constantly evolving just as we are.
Well, we're back and ready to continue our deep dive into the world of Martha Bradley and the 18th century cuisine. Our journey has taken us from those bustling kitchens of Bath all the way to colonial America and beyond.
And we've learned so much about this enigmatic culinary figure, her unique blend of British tradition and French flair, her commitment to fresh seasonal ingredients and our unwavering belief in the power of education, to empower home cooks.
And we've also seen how she was able to make the most of every ingredient, even those that might make a modern foodie, kind of squirm a little bit. It's a reminder of how much our relationship with food has changed over the centuries.
It certainly has, but even as we've explored those differences between 18th century cuisine and our own, culinary landscape, we've also discovered some surprising connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Martha Bradley's emphasis on seasonality and resourcefulness, that really resonates with today's focus on sustainable eating and minimizing food waste. It's like her culinary wisdom, which was once forgotten, is now being rediscovered and embraced in a whole new way.
It really speaks to the enduring power of her work and her ability to connect with cooks across generations. And it also shows us that, food trends are cyclical and ideas and practices from the past can often find new life and relevance in the present.
So true. Well, as we wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder. It's something we touched on earlier, but I think it's worth revisiting.
I'm intrigued. What's on your mind?
Imagine just for a moment that we could sit down and have a conversation with Martha Bradley herself. And what would you ask her? What insights would you hope to gain from her firsthand experience?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think I'd be most curious to hear about her experiences as a professional cook in 18th century Bath. The challenges she faced, the triumphs she celebrated, the people who influenced her culinary journey.
I love that. It would be so fascinating to step back in time and get a glimpse into her world. And I'd be really eager to learn more about her teaching methods.
Yeah.
What was her approach to sharing her culinary knowledge? What advice would she give to aspiring cooks today?
And I wonder what she would think of our modern obsession with food blogs and cooking shows and celebrity chefs. Would she embrace these new platforms for culinary expression, or would she long for those simpler days of handwritten recipes and word of mouth recommendations?
Those are all such great questions. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we don't have a time machine to whisk us back to 18th century Britain for a chat with Martha.
Yeah.
But even without those answers, I think it's safe to say that Martha Bradley's legacy lives on.
Absolutely. Her work continues to inspire, her recipes continue to tantalize, and her story continues to captivate. And maybe in a way that's the greatest gift she could have given us, a glimpse into the culinary world of the past and a reminder that the joy of cooking and the love of good food, those things transcend time and place.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time for us to bid farewell to Martha Bradley and her culinary adventures. But before we do, I want to thank you for being such a wonderful guide on this deep dive.
The pleasure was all mine. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world around us. And who knows, maybe you'll even be inspired to try your hand at a Martha Bradley recipe or two. Just maybe skip the powdered earthworms.
Agreed. Happy cooking, everyone.